Baby, you look so beautiful.
The hush in the courtroom on a blustery Tuesday, May 27th, 2025, wasn't just a lull in conversation. It was a living, breathing entity. It pressed down on Chance Combs, a tangible weight on her shoulders as she walked towards the witness stand. Every eye in the federal courthouse in downtown Manhattan was fixed on her. 1,000 unseen hands reaching out, not quite touching, but certainly judging. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a gilded cage, much like the one she had lived in for so long. For years, she had been a ghost in the narrative of the Combs empire, the adopted daughter, often seen in family photos, smiling politely, a silent presence amidst the chaos. Now, at 23, she was no longer a ghost. She was flesh and blood, bone and grit. And she was about to shatter the carefully constructed world of Sean Diddy Combs. Chance remembered the morning clearly. The sky over Manhattan had been an indifferent gray, mirroring the turmoil in her stomach. She'd chosen a charcoal pantsuit, a stark contrast to the vibrant, often extravagant attire Diddy had always encouraged. It was a silent rebellion, a small assertion of self in a life that had been anything but her own. Also present in Chance's thoughts that morning was Ava Combs, Diddy's adopted daughter, whose presence added another layer of complexity to the already fraught situation. Her dark, lustrous hair, usually styled in intricate braids, was pulled back in a simple, elegant ponytail. She wanted to look strong, unadorned, every bit the woman who was about to speak her truth. "Are you ready, Chance?" her lawyer, a kind woman named Sarah, had asked, her voice soft but firm. Chance had nodded, a dry lump forming in her throat. "As I'll ever be." The walk from the waiting room to the courtroom felt like miles. Each step was a deliberate act of courage. She could feel the stares, the whispers, the sheer weight of expectation. She knew what they wanted: scandal, drama, a peek behind the velvet rope of Diddy's seemingly perfect life. But she wasn't there for them. She was there for a younger Chance, for Mia, for Cassie, for every silenced voice. As she entered the hallowed space, her gaze swept across the room. Journalists scribbled furiously, their faces a mixture of avid curiosity and grim determination. The public gallery buzzed with a low hum, a mix of Diddy's fervent fans and equally fervent detractors. And then her eyes landed on him, Sean Diddy Combs. He sat at the defense table, his usual bravado chipped away by weeks of grueling testimony. He looked smaller, somehow, less imposing than the titan she had known. His face, usually a canvas of cool indifference, was momentarily stripped bare, revealing a flicker of raw hurt, perhaps even fear. His eyes, dark and piercing, locked onto hers. For a moment, time seemed to stop. A silent plea or a desperate warning passed between them. Chance held his gaze, refusing to flinch. This was it. His lead attorney, the formidable and notoriously aggressive Eleanor Vance, visibly stiffened. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair seemed to bristle, and a faint flush crept up her usually pale neck. This was a variable they had not accounted for. Chance Combs was an insider, a family member, and that made her testimony not just a revelation, but a betrayal of the highest order to Diddy's carefully crafted image. "State your full name for the record," the prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Evelyn Reed, intoned. Reed, a woman in her late 40s with a sharp intellect and an uncanny ability to dissect deception, had orchestrated this moment with the precision of a seasoned conductor. She had waited for the perfect psychological impact. "Chance Combs," she replied, her voice clear, surprisingly steady, but with a subtle tremor that only those closest to the stand could detect. A wave of murmurs swept through the gallery, quickly silenced by the judge's stern gaze. Reed began gently, establishing Chance's background, her relationship to the defendant, the years she spent under his roof. It was a methodical process, laying the groundwork for the emotional bombshells that were to come. "Miss Combs," Reed continued, her voice softening slightly, Can you describe what life was like inside Mr. Combs's household? Chance paused, her gaze drifting over the courtroom, avoiding Diddy's intense stare. She took a deep breath, the scent of old paper and nervous sweat filling her lungs. It was a world unto itself, she began, her voice gaining strength. A fortress of opulence, yes, but also of control, absolute control. A collective sigh, almost imperceptible, escaped the gallery. This was the raw, unvarnished truth people had hungered for. Eleanor Vance shifted in her seat, a faint scowl creasing her forehead. This was soft, emotional testimony, hard to object to on legal grounds, but devastating nonetheless. Chance closed her eyes for a fleeting moment, allowing the memories to flood in. The sprawling mansions in Los Angeles, the palatial estate in Miami, the penthouse in New York, each one a lavish prison meticulously designed. My schedule, down to the minute, was dictated by an unseen hand, she recounted, her voice taking on a distant quality, as if she were reliving it. Ava Combs, my sister and I often talked about it, she added, how our schooling was exclusively tutored within the mansion's lavish confines. Even our friendships, vetted, approved, and often dissolved at Mr. Combs's whim. She remembered a particular incident from when she was 12, in 2013. She'd met a girl at a charity event, a bright, bubbly girl named Chloe who loved art and shared Chance's fascination with old movies. They'd exchanged numbers, excited about a budding friendship. But within days, Chloe's parents had received a polite but firm call from Diddy's team, stating that Chance's schedule was too demanding for outside distractions. Chloe had stopped calling. Chance learned quickly that connections outside the family were rarely tolerated. Ava went through similar things, Chance shared, her voice tinged with a shared understanding. It felt less like a home and more like an elaborate stage, Chance continued, her voice now steady, imbued with a quiet power. Where everyone had a part, and Mr. Combs was the director, producer, and sole critic. She described the constant pressure to maintain an image of perfection. Every public appearance, every family photo op was rehearsed. Smiles were practiced, poses choreographed. We were performers, not a family, she said, her voice tinged with a deep sadness. Our personal lives were just another aspect of the brand. A low, sympathetic murmur swept through the courtroom. A woman in the front row dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Diddy's usual composed demeanor faltered, his gaze fixed on Chance, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. The real shockwave hit on Wednesday, May 28, 2025, during the afternoon session. Chance had spent the morning detailing the psychological landscape of the Combs household, the whispers, the unspoken rules, the constant pressure to maintain an image of perfection. But now, she moved to something far more concrete, something that tied the abstract control to a chillingly tangible act. Miss Combs, Reed prompted, her voice gentle but firm. You mentioned a legal document you were asked to sign. Can you tell the court about that? Chance's eyes, usually so composed, flickered with a raw vulnerability. This was the memory that still tightened her chest, even after all these years. I was 14 years old. It was August 12th, 2015. I remember the date because it was just a few days after my birthday, and I was still feeling hopeful, innocent, like the world was full of possibilities. She remembered the feeling of excitement, a rare emotion in her controlled life, having just celebrated with a small supervised party. She'd received a new sketch pad, a set of professional pencils. She'd spent the morning sketching, lost in her own world. Mr. Combs's lawyers, two men I had never seen before, came to the house, she continued, her voice gaining a surprising edge of indignation. They sat me down in the grand library amidst all those leather-bound books that no one ever seemed to read. It felt very official, very important. Ava Combs was there too, Chance added, her voice a little softer, sitting quietly beside me. She was only 13 at the time, and I could see the same confusion and fear in her eyes. She described the scene with vivid clarity. The hushed tones of the lawyers, their solemn faces, the sheaf of papers presented to her. They told me it was standard procedure to protect the family from media intrusion, to keep me safe from the prying eyes of the tabloids. They said it was just a formality, a simple agreement. "And what was this agreement as you understood it?" Reed pressed, her voice a gentle invitation, allowing Chance the space to fully articulate her adolescent understanding. Chance swallowed hard. It was a non-disclosure agreement, a very comprehensive one. At the time, I thought it was about paparazzi, about gossip, about not letting pictures get out or stories about what we ate for breakfast. But in hindsight, I realized it was about silence, about control, about making sure I couldn't speak about what I saw, what I heard, what I lived. It was a lock on my tongue. They presented the same document to Ava, Chance elaborated, telling her the exact same things. We just looked at each other, bewildered, and signed. A low, guttural murmur swept through the courtroom, louder this time. A few gasps were distinctly audible. The idea of a 14-year-old being pressured to sign an NDA, not by a stranger, but by the man who was supposed to be her protector, struck a chilling chord. Diddy's legal team exchanged frantic glances. Eleanor Vance's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing as she sensed the damage being done. "Did you have legal counsel present, Miss Combs?" Reed asked, her voice laced with a quiet disbelief that mirrored the public sentiment. Chance let out a bitter, humorless laugh that held no joy. "No, my legal counsel was Mr. Combs's legal counsel. They were his lawyers. They told me it was for my own good, that it was family business. I just signed it. I trusted him. I had no reason not to. He was the only father figure I truly knew." A single defiant tear escaped her eye and traced a path down her cheek. "There's a thin line between love and power," Chance told the court, her voice rising with an unexpected strength that surprised even herself. And in that house, everything slowly, insidiously tilted toward power. Not love, never truly love. It was a transaction, my silence, my obedience for my place in his world. The words hung in the air, a devastating indictment from the most unlikely of sources. The man who had cultivated an image as a doting father, a benevolent force in the industry, was now being exposed by the very person he had taken under his wing. The public gallery buzzed with a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. A woman in the front row openly wept, her face etched with empathy. A young man, a hip-hop fan who had once idolized Diddy, sat with his head in his hands, shaking it slowly, his disillusionment palpable. The trial had been a parade of shocking revelations. On April 22nd, Mia, a former assistant, testified about a life of terror and multiple sexual assaults. Chance and Ava, seated in the courtroom, felt profound sadness for this stranger. Hearing Mia speak, it was like a part of my own story was being told, Chance thought. That pain. It was too familiar. On April 25th, the infamous surveillance video from the Intercontinental Hotel, dated March 5th, 2016, was played, showing Diddy assaulting his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Gasps of horror swept through the courtroom. Ava, seeing the Cassie video, visibly recoiled, tears welling up. Both she and Chance had witnessed similar violent moments within the home and lavish parties that devolved into nightmares. I remember one particular party. It was around late 2017 in the Miami mansion, Chance recounted, her voice raw. The music was deafening, the lights were flashing, and there were so many people, many of whom seemed dazed. I saw him physically push a young woman into a room with a male guest, her face clearly showing fear. I saw him verbally abuse a male musician who refused to participate in an activity he deemed inappropriate, threatening to destroy his career. Ava, sitting next to Chance, nodded. The memories seared into her mind. Remember that night, Chance, when he dragged that girl into the room, or when he screamed at that guy for saying no? Other witnesses followed. Capricorn Clark detailed an alleged kidnapping. Dawn Richard described Diddy's physical assaults on Cassie, and stylist Carrie Morgan accused Diddy of assault and hush money. On May 20th, Daniel Phillip, the Punisher, gave the most lurid testimony, describing being paid to engage in sexual acts with Cassie while Diddy filmed. At this point, Ava and Chance could no longer bear it and abruptly exited the courtroom, their faces ashen. Later that day, during a short recess, Chance and Ava found a moment to speak with Cassie Ventura, who was present in the courthouse. Chance gently took Cassie's hand. "Cassie," she began, her voice filled with profound empathy. We saw things. Not everything, but enough to know what you went through was real. We're so sorry. We wish we could have done something then." Ava, her eyes welling up, nodded vigorously. "Yeah, Cassie. We always wished you could have just gotten away. We talked about it sometimes, quietly, wishing you were safe." Cassie, her beautiful eyes softened, squeezed Chance's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It means more than you know to hear that. To know I wasn't alone in seeing it." "You were never alone, Cassie," Chance affirmed, her voice firm. "And you're not alone now. We're here for you." On Friday, May 30th, 2025, Chance Combs returned for cross-examination. Eleanor Vance, Diddy's lead attorney, approached with the predatory grace of a lioness. "Miss Combs," Vance began skeptically, "you claim to have been so controlled, so silenced, yet here you are speaking freely. Isn't that correct?" Chance met her gaze unflinchingly. "I am speaking now because I finally have the courage, Miss Vance, because the truth demands to be heard, because others suffered in silence, and I won't let their stories be forgotten." Vance pressed on, implying Chance sought a lucrative book deal or reality show. "You accepted the benefits of Mr. Combs' generosity for years, didn't you?" Chance paused, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. "I was a child," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I didn't choose that life. I was born into it, then adopted into it. Every gift felt like another chain, Miss Vance." "So, you're telling the court that all the love Mr. Combs showed you was merely a facade for control?" Vance challenged. "Love and control are not mutually exclusive in his world, Miss Vance," Chance countered, her voice steady, almost mournful. "He loved the idea of control, the power it gave him. The problem was when that loyalty wavered, or when the facade cracked, the love vanished, replaced by something cold and terrifying." Diddy flinched at the defense table, his eyes on Chance now unreadable. Legal experts agree that Chance's testimony, if it held up, would be devastating. Professor Lena Sharma from NYU School of Law commented on NPR, "The prosecution's strategy is clear: to dismantle Diddy's carefully curated image of a benevolent mogul and loving father. Chance's words expose a darker reality of alleged psychological manipulation and fear." As the courthouse doors closed on Friday afternoon, May 30th, 2025, the echoes of Chance Combs' testimony lingered. The fate of Sean Diddy Combs now rests with the jury, but regardless of the verdict, one thing is clear: the silence has been broken. Chance Combs, once imprisoned within gilded walls, has become the architect of her own voice, opening a difficult but necessary new chapter of truth and accountability in the once unshakable empire of hip-hop. The world is watching,